Faraway Wanderers, is a priest novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Volume 2. Chapter 26. Lord 7th. The lush green of trees that stayed flourishing year-round, the bright prosperity, the birds that passed by, the ranges of mountains extended up and down uninterrupted, like the curve of a beauty's back. This place was South Xinjiang. Under an old tree that had to be at least 100 years old sat a South Xinjiang boy with perfect posture. He was around 10 and was doing assignments. He might be young, but his determination was bursting, as he had been focused for 2 hours now, looking like nothing could disrupt his work. Next to the table was a deck chair arranged horizontally, and on it was a man resting with his eyes closed. He was dressed in robes like someone from the Central Land, and between his thighs was an old open book. At the man's feet was a small sable. Being ignored by everyone, it chased its own tail in boredom. At that moment, a warrior walked to them, letter in hand. Seeing the sight before him, his steps got quieter and he waited by the side in silence. The man on the deck chair opened his eyes. He looked halfway over 20s, his long narrow eyes carrying a hint of amusement. When he looked around, he was truly an exceptional beauty. The small sable nimbly jumped into his embrace and climbed up his shoulders, its tail stroking his chin. The warrior presented the letter with politeness. "My lord, it is a letter from head butler Song." Lord 7th uttered a word in assent and opened the letter with only mild interest, but halfway through reading, he abruptly sat up, the look in his eyes sobering. "Is it really him?" The small sable, upon seeing the mysterious paper in front of it, reached out its claws, but was held back by its owner by the neck and gently thrown onto the table by which the boy was sitting. Only then did he raise his head. "Who is it, father?" The man didn't answer right away. He stood up and took 2 steps forward, leisurely folding the letter while talking about something completely off topic. "Luta, did you remember what I told you last time about the principle of this world, about how division precedes unity and vice versa, like a circle?" The young man seemed to be used to his father's habit of speaking nonsense before reaching the focal point, so he played along. "You say that it is simply like how after sitting for a long time, one has to stand up, and when they can't stand anymore they sit down again. There is no philosophy to it, just that us humans are born to suffer." A satisfied smile appeared on the man's face, and he said to the dazed South Xinjiang warrior, "Axinlay, go find your great shaman for me and ask him if he thinks what I said is reasonable." Axinlay's face was of pure confusion. "Huh?" The man was about to say something when they heard a small laugh and a gentle voice. "Are you so unoccupied to the point of wanting to stir up troubles?" The man who just came in was dressed in black from head to toe, carrying a scepter that was also solid black. Upon seeing him, Axinlay bowed. "Great shaman." The shaman muttered a word of acknowledgement and gestured at him. "Go do your work, Bwin, don't always make fun of good-natured people." The man named Bwin gave him the folded letter while still smiling. "Guess who has graced our shop with their holy presence?" The shaman didn't feel particularly intrigued, but he received it anyway with a grunt, "As long as it's not the Emperor of Decheng." Lord Zhou. On the other man's face was a smile that carried no good intentions at all. "My little Venom, how about we pay Zhongyuan a visit? Since our old friend has asked for help, isn't it natural that we should put our lives on the line for him if possible?" The shaman looked at the other man's mischievous face without saying anything, but internally he knew the other clearly just wanted to watch chaos happen while helping his friend. Joe's issue, not knowing he had signed his fate for having such an acquaintance, was currently distressed about a very materialistic matter. Giant's stomach Yebai's presence had left him with a money problem. After the short staring contest with Wen Kexing, Joe's issue came to a realization: if Wen Kexing was reliable, then sows could climb trees. He must have possessed terrible luck to be running into both a bijader and a freeloader. How great! Wen Kexing, seeing that Joe's issue's gaze had turned sour, couldn't help but tighten his clothes around him. He said in a small voice, "I only sell my entertainment value and not my body, you must not leave me here." Joe's issue asked, "So what are you going to do now?" Wen Kexing said, "Since you're the one who treated us, you should sell yourself instead." Joe's issue gritted out, "I'm not a fucking maiden, will you buy me if I do sell myself then?" Wen Kexing's eyes immediately brightened, "Of course, I will buy you even if I have to sell away all of my fortunes." Joe's issue lowered his voice, "Can you sell all of your fortunes to pay for this meal first then?" After a stretch of silence, Wen Kexing finally replied, "Asu, how about we just run?" Joe's issue turned his face away without a word. He might have done some roguelike activities to earn some cash, but there was still some conscience left in him. Leaving without paying for a meal was very much against his code of conduct, and he looked at Wen Kexing's openly brazen face, and there's this despicable man. The moment his face turned, he saw someone walking in. Joe's issue's spirit was revived as he called out, "How coincidental, young Miss Gu." The moment Gu Xiang heard it and saw the two of them, her face turned green with fear. She was going to leave immediately, but she was not as fast as Wen Kexing. The man was already standing in front of her and asked serenely, "Ah Xiang, why are you running?" A pale Gu Xiang managed to reply, "Moss. Master, I just went the wrong way." Wen Kexing patted her shoulder and tugged her back inside, "Don't be shy, if you're here then stay." Gu Xiang felt goosebumps breaking out on her skin, feeling like there was no way her master could harbor good intentions. But now that she couldn't escape, she had to stay close to his every step with skittishness, her posture not unlike someone who was going to be executed. Wen Kexing led her to their table and asked, "Do you have money with you?" Immediately Gu Xiang pulled out all she had, from silver crumbles to paper cash and gold ingots. Only now did Wen Kexing nod in contentment and shout with the confidence of a loaded man, "Show us the bill." Gu Xiang thought, "No wonder that fortune teller told me to use my wealth to avoid bad luck, oh merciful Buddha." Now that she had helped them, Wen Kexing was reasonable enough to let her tag along again, no longer chasing her away. Walking ahead of them was Joe's issue, who was deliberating something. After a while, he suddenly looked back and asked directly, "Brother Wen, why did you burn the room of the Zhang brat that night?" Gu Xiang was alarmed, "Master, you committed arsonery." Wen Kexing said entirely seriously, "I saw an astronomical phenomenon indicating that the kid would face a great calamity and it needed fire to be quelled, so I did it right away." In the middle of his talk, he saw Joe's issue and Gu Xiang's disdainful faces, so he added, "Acts done out of goodwill don't need to be said out loud, don't look at me with such adoration." Gu Xiang said, "Master, can you see my fate in the stars too?" Wen Kexing replied, "There will be a great disaster happening to you if you don't shut up for a day." As expected, Gu Xiang didn't open her mouth again. They returned to the place where the execution happened during the day. Most of the crowd had dispersed and the ghost was nowhere to be found. It was said that his martial arts skills were crippled completely, and a chain was pierced through his shoulder blades to keep him in place. They arrived when Cao whining, accompanied by Zhang Chenling, was looking for them. "Brother Zhou, young brother Zhang told me that you are his master." He suddenly stopped talking to gape at Gu Xiang, who was standing behind Wen Kexing, his mouth wide open. Gu Xiang blinked a few times for no reasons, while Cao Whining kept staring at her stupidly. Next to him, Zhou Zisha cleared his voice. Cao Whining was pulled out of the daze and blushed deeply, stuttering, Miss. Apologies, I didn't mean to be rude, really, just. Gu Xiang, unsure about what to make of that, felt like this young man was not quite right in the head. She saw Cao Whining abruptly took a few steps back while speaking with the smallest voice possible. "My last name is Cao, first name Whining, from Tai Tai Hang, belonging to the Wei line of Qingfeng sword sect. My master is Qingfeng's P patriarch Mo Huayang." After judging him once, Gu Xiang asked Wen Kexing, "Master, what's wrong with him?" Shattered on the ground before he could announce his entire family tree were Cao Whining's pure, juvenile feelings that had just blossomed. Zhou Zisha glanced at Zhang Chenling and said after some thoughts, "Over here, brat." Seeing that the elder didn't shun him away anymore, Zhang Chenling was overjoyed and cheerily followed him. When Kexing patted Cao Whining's shoulder and went back to his room with Gu Xiang. The moment Gu Xiang walked past him, Cao Whining could sense a waft of fragrance that muddled his brain completely. Only when they were long gone was he snapped out of the trance, and he started whispering in amazement. "Guan Guan," crooned the osprey, from where amidst the water, the north was famed for having beauty, "who with a gentleman would make a fated pair? How can such a beautiful young maiden exist, how does?" He walked away while still lamenting, again drowned in his infatuation. Gu Xiang whispered to Wen Kexing once they were far away, "Master, old Meng is also here, he wants to tell you about below." Wen Kexing was completely undisturbed. The corner of his lips lifted, but there was no hint of a smile in his eyes. He said gently, "Even old Meng wants to tell me what to do." "Yes." Zhou Zisha silently brought Zhang Chenling to his own room. Nodding once, he said, "Sit down, I want to ask you something." Zhang Chenling sat, perfectly well behaved. "What do you want to know, Shifu?" Zhou Zisha mused before asking, "Did the man with the mark of a hand on his face whom you met that day ask you about whether you had come across a man with a finger missing?" Zhang Chenling nodded. Zhou Zishu asked again, "So have you met him?" Zhang Chenling shook his head. "Shifu, who is that man?" Not giving the younger an answer, Zhou Zishu crossed his legs, index finger lightly tapping one of his knees. Xuefang the hanged ghost was rumored to have lost a finger, that was why he knew the man in black who Gu Xiang killed in the abandoned shrine was not him. But what was the intention of the red-clothed delighted morning ghost? After a while, he spoke slowly with unusual seriousness. "Try to remember it more clearly, kiddo. Did you see anything out of the ordinary that night?" By that night, he meant the night the entire Zhang family was murdered. Zhang Qingling's breath quickened, and Zhou Zishu softened his voice even further. "Don't rush things, just think it over carefully. I'm afraid that memory might be very important." Zhang Chenling paled. After a good while, he shook his head while replying in a choked voice, "Shifu, you ask me whether there was something unusual, but wasn't that entire night an unusual event?" Zhou Zishu's brows furrowed and he no longer pushed him further. After a bout of grave silence, he said, "I'm going to teach you a mnemonic rhyme. You have to try to comprehend it yourself and utilize it to further your cultivation. You can come to me if there is any confusion." Zhang Chenling was dumbfounded. Zhou Zishu added, You shouldn't leave Sir Zhao's side during the coming days, and must not act on your own or leave the Gao's manor, do you understand? Zhang Qingling's eyes widened. Shifu. Thank you, Shifu. Zhou Zishu awkwardly coughed and scolded him, stop speaking nonsense and remember what I'm going to say, I will not repeat it for a second time. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.